Hello and welcome back to Building on a Budget Models. I'm Thomas and this is the second and final part of the rusty Renault 4CV in 1/24 by Hella. Before we start, I hope you're being kind to yourself and being kind to those people around you. We're still in unprecedented times and I just think that we could all just take that little moment to help ourselves and those people around us. Thanks. Right, so here, as showed you in the last one, I painted the seats in ochre and then I covered them in this broad masking tape. Then it was painted in matte leather brown from Humbrol. And I was really happy with the effect that this gave. Did about 3 coats and I wasn't worried too much about it being that smooth. Then after it had dried, I used this nail file to sand it away in a few different places to make it look like the material had worn away. I then went onto the front suspension. It's quite simple to see where some of these places go, but I used some super glue just to give it some extra strength. Some of these weren't painted as well as they could be, but I'll add some more paint and obviously some weathering later on as well. These all go together quite nicely. The instructions want you to kind of heat press them in, but I found that wasn't necessary. Some of these bits didn't need to be painted because you won't see them once the car is all together. There are pinpoints for the driver's and passenger seat in the front, but they're very small, and I had to be careful not to cover them up with the masking tape. This is the radiator, which I did in semi-gloss black and then dry brushed on a little bit of aluminium. There's a few kind of pipes and things which go into that, and then it fits quite nicely into place. Important to put it in before the rear seat, as the seat kind of goes over the top of it, as you can see here. Now they've got these weird sort of door cards. I painted them in yellow, the same colour as the bodywork, and then used some Vallejo hull red for these interior parts. There's also this decal which goes on the dashboard here, which is the kind of, I think it was described as ears, the kind of clock that goes in the middle. And then the steering wheel and kind of handles were done in a kind of buttercup yellow. I then realised that I had forgotten to add some chrome to the bottom of the bodywork, so I used the same trick as I had done before and added it. Pushed it back in using cotton bud and added some weathering powder later on. Sanded down the edges of these windows and then added the rubber trim with the pen. In pictures that I saw, the car more often had a rubber trim rather than a chrome trim. I felt that this fitted in quite nicely. I also masked around this kind of rubber trim that goes around the rear wings and then added that with pen too. Also used some more of the kind of dark black wash from humbrol to add a little bit of dirt in places around some of the chrome trim. I stuck some tape onto the front window and then kind of masked out where there might be kind of marks from the windscreen wipers, and then added some of the dark wash to that as well. I then added a very small stone chip with a sharp craft knife. Not sure you'll see it, but it's nice to know it's there. There you can see where the wipers have been to work. And then test fitted the window just to make sure I was happy with it. Gave a few slits in some of the seats and then got some Tamiya curved masking tape, which I coloured in black with some sharpie to make it look like they'd tried to fix it. I then tried to use some of the new UMP strong decal solution which I got, along with some spare Marlboro decals and a spare bit of sprue to try and make a pack of cigarettes to go into the car. Later added some aluminium foil on this as well and put it into the glove box, as you can see here. I then dirtied up the seats with a little bit of that humbrol black wash again. This can be a bit gritty, so it's good for making things look dirty. This is the fuel cap which goes on the back. As you can see here, it's far too shiny, so I'll weather that later. And the same goes for the housings for the headlights. Decided to use this F decal, which I had left over from a Renault Golf, and also the front badge is red, so I used a bit of sharpie. Now I saw a method where you can mix the humbrol weathering powders with some decal fix. One of the strengths of using it with decal fix is that you can then go over it with water and a brush or a cotton bud and wipe it away. So if you go a bit overboard, as I did later on, you can easily wipe some of that away to rectify your mistakes. These door cards fit in quite nicely. I used some super glue and then these clamps to secure them into place. This is a nice way of getting the windows in, I feel, and then the steering wheel and the dashboard fits in the middle. You can see it quite nicely through like that. I added some rust wash to the dashboard as well, and then curiously the front window fits in from the outside, whereas the rear window fits in from the inside. As you can see there, I added some aluminium foil to hinge the rear boot lid, and there's the pedals, which goes in like so. Now these side lights, kind of indicators, are done in the body colour, and then I used a bit of orange sharpie to add the lights themselves. They are slightly different, so check the instructions to get them the right way round. Then used some more weathering powder on the end of a cocktail stick just to kind of dirty up the interior. I'm not sure how much you'll notice these details, but you know. Then, on a recommendation of Kit Builder Chris to add some more French items, I made a beret out of some felt, using PVA glue to stick it together, and then glued it onto the back seat. I think it looks very nice. And the same with the scratch-built Le Monde newspaper, which is just printed and then folded up. And the rear view mirror here is just left as is. Now putting the body together here is quite tricky. The door cards make the body quite wide, so you've got to kind of sort of put the engine into sort of the middle of the car and then sort of slide it backwards. Found that this took a few different tries before I was really happy. It wasn't absolutely perfect, but partly I kind of didn't really care because this car is supposed to look a little bit worse for wear anyway. The spare wheel fits there in the front. The headlight lenses have got a little tab at the top which helps to fit them in, and the windscreen wipers come from the chrome sprue, so I just add a little sharpie for the rubber. One of these pinged out of my tweezers, but fortunately it had glue on it and it ended up sticking to the wall. There's a fog light and the klaxon which go onto the front bumper, which are optional parts. There's a really horrible mould seam down the middle of the bumpers, unfortunately, but since I was going to weather it, I decided I couldn't be bothered to remove it. I did, however, use a little bit of Tamiya matte clear, and I thinned that down with some Vallejo airbrush thinners. I did this to slow down the curing time. So you add that on like so, and then before it's dried, I dab on a little bit of neat kind of rust weathering powder, and it kind of seeps in and gives it kind of a natural look. The thinning of the Vallejo thinners means that the drying time is slowed as well. Now for the wheels, I did the same method as I did with the body. Firstly gave it an undercoat, then some hairspray and some salt, and then one coat of yellow humbrol acrylic. That was then washed off once it was all dry, and I was pretty happy with the effects here. Now there is a right way and a wrong way for these tyres to go on, so if you're building this, make sure you get them the right way around. These are also quite soft tyres, so be gentle when you're sanding them down. They fit on quite nicely if you just kind of give them a little twist. Add a little bit of super glue around the edge of where these hubcaps were going to go, and then they slotted into place. I chose to add only 3 just to make it look a little bit like it lost a little bit, and then did exactly the same method for the rust effects as I had done on the bumper. The rear bumper fits in really nicely. Now the decals here are a bit rubbish, but what I did was I applied the front number plate to some foil and the rear one to the number plate that was supplied, this kind of really strange shaped piece. Rear lights were just done in red sharpie, and they fit in really nicely. Now, as the decals were so rubbish, they broke, so I then replaced them with some French number plates that I found on a Renault Golf. In order to make this front one, I folded over some aluminium tape to make it a bit thicker, and also meant that I could attach it in a kind of jaunty angle like it was damaged. The rear number plate needs to be fitted in such a way so that you can still open the rear boot, so that needs a few practices to get it right. Now there is a wing mirror and also something else which you don't use. The wing mirror though is all kind of rough on the back, so I covered it with a little bit of aluminium foil to make it a little smoother, and then that was just fitted into place with a little bit of Gorilla Glue gel. Now I'd then done the same weathering procedure to the underside, but I thought it was a bit over the top in places, so with a wet cotton bud I just rubbed away some of the kind of rust weathering powder to make it look a little bit more realistic. And there it is. It's finished. This is one of the strangest builds I've ever done. It's hard to know kind of when you've done too much or too little with the rust weathering powder. As I said before, this is supposed to look like you could imagine it still being run. Please let me know in the comments what you think. There's a few more images for you to see, but thanks for watching. So please leave a comment below. Please do like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you soon.